Good evening. It's good to see you all here and in person, and as well as those of you who may be watching on Zoom. We're grateful for your presence this evening, and hopefully the things I prepared will be encouraging to you or for you. I want to thank Louie for the third year in a row scheduling me on Super Bowl Sunday. It's true, I believe the last three Super Bowl Sundays I have had the PM lesson, so I'm used to it by now, and it's okay, it's good. So anytime I have a chance to prepare and share something for you is a good day. So no Super Bowl message tonight, though. No Super Bowl. But there's something big happening on Wednesday. What happens on Wednesday? Valentine's Day? That's Wednesday? Valentine's Day, Wednesday. Okay, that wasn't what I was thinking, but I got it now. It's on my notes. Valentine's Day. What else is happening on Wednesday? Oh, I didn't know that, but yeah, we got a birthday. Okay. Anything else on Wednesday? Oh, we're changing classes. Yeah, we'll meet for Bible study. Yeah, that wasn't on my list either. No, the big thing on Wednesday is poll day for the Daytona 500. Yeah, that's the day that the cars all qualify for the big race next Sunday. And you see, NASCAR teams have been working for this day for the last 2 or 3 months. They've built cars, they've tested them, they've built engines, they've tested the engines, they've conducted multiple tire tests, they've tested the body styles, the aerodynamics, they've been in the wind tunnel for weeks, all to make their cars as fast as they possibly can go to sit on the pole, the position number 1 for the Daytona 500 next Sunday. That's been their goal. And we smile about NASCAR, but NASCAR for the last few years has been one of the more popular spectator sports in America. It has a wide spectrum of fans, and maybe some of you out there are NASCAR fans. But in all seriousness, NASCAR is a sport that isn't afraid to profess a connection to Christianity. As you watch races throughout the year and you watch the various practices and so forth, and you'll notice drivers and owners and crew members acting sometimes and behaving and speaking in a way that glorifies God. Just about every winner of a race, when they conduct that post-race interview right there on the track, if you listen to them, most of the time, one of the things they'll be thankful for is they'll thank God for allowing them to be in that position to win a race. And I think NASCAR, and I could be wrong on this, so if there's a correction to be made, I'll make it, but it's one of the only major sporting events, the weekly races, that begins their pre-race ceremonies with a prayer. I could be wrong on that. I mean, we often hear God Bless America. We hear the national anthem at many sporting events. But there's often a public prayer offered over the PA asking for safety for all the competitors. And they usually invoke the name of Jesus Christ in that prayer, which I always found interesting. I could be wrong. There may be other sporting events that do that, but that's the one that sticks out in my mind. So with that as our background, I want to go back to this poll day and this preparation. And I want to talk to you tonight about the way that our lives as Christians is like those NASCAR teams that are preparing for Wednesday. So tonight I want to talk about preparing for the race. And when you hear the term or reference to a race and you think about the Bible, probably 1 Corinthians 9 verses 24 and 25 comes into your heads. And we read, let us read this. So 1 Corinthians 9, beginning in verse 24. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. You see, each week NASCAR drivers have one goal. The goal is to win the race. And we too, as Christians, have a goal in our race. It's a little different race, but our goal is to get to heaven. And obviously, one of the biggest differences is that a NASCAR race runs about 3 to 4 hours, whereas our race is our entire lifetime. But regardless of whatever type of race is being run, the big question is, how do you win? What needs to happen to win? What needs to be done? If we think about a NASCAR race, what needs to be done to prepare the car? What does a driver need to do? What types of decisions need to be made in order to win that race? What changes need to be made throughout that race to make sure we get in position number one? And I'm sure there's more questions, but those were some of the big ones that I had thought of. And the same thing holds true for us in our race. How and what can we do to win our race? So that's what I'd like to address tonight, is try to address that question of how. How do we win our race? And we'll begin with our attitude. Before a driver can even think about winning a race, they've got to first qualify for it, and that's the stress for Wednesday for these guys. 40-plus drivers will probably put their cars on the track just hoping that they'll be fast enough to qualify for that race. But before they even get into the car, they've got to have the attitude that they can do it, that they can win the race, that they can be the fastest. Otherwise, why do it? Why do it? I'm reminded when I was first hired as an assistant baseball coach at DeKalb in my 30 some odd years ago, I sat down with the head coach and I expressed an interest, and his first statement to me, and I don't remember much from the rest of the interview, but I do remember this first sentence. He said, "We don't play to have fun. We play to win. And when we win, we have fun." And you have to understand, Coach Jones had won over 700 baseball games in his coaching career, so I had an idea that he knew what he was talking about. And I can assure you, every game we played that season and every season after that, we played to win. We played to win. We didn't go out there just to play. So we too must have that similar attitude. We have to play and participate in our race as if we want to win, as if we want to get to heaven. And that starts with hearing the word. Matthew 11, verse 15. In Matthew 11, verse 15, Jesus tells us that he who has ears to hear, let him hear. And in John chapter 10, verse 27, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. We hear a lot of different opinions throughout our days, a lot of different ideas, and we just need to be able to discern those that are the correct ones, those that are going to help us get our way towards heaven. And then once we hear, we start by believing and then building that attitude of obedience. In Matthew 7, we read the parable of the two builders. One builds his house on the sand and the other builds his on the rock. And as the weather moves through, the house on the sand is taken down and destroyed while the house on the rock stands. And we've heard this story many times, just reminding us that when we build our house, it must be on that rock. It must be based in Jesus Christ. And then as we continue to mold this attitude, we got to be willing to consider the cost of this attitude. And at times we have to sacrifice, and sometimes we suffer to strengthen this attitude. And this is shared with us in Luke chapter 14, verses 26 through 33. And again, this is Jesus speaking, saying, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? Lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. Sometimes we have to sacrifice some things that are close and dear and near to us to commit ourselves. I'm sure I'm not the only one up here who has had a relationship either weakened or severed because of our decision, our commitment to Christ. And it hurts. People that we love, people that we care for, people that we still love and care for, that just don't understand the changes that we've made in our lives so that we can get towards heaven. And again, I'm not the only one who's probably been in that situation. But Revelation 2, verse 10, reminds us that even though we may go through that suffering, the reward is worth it. In Revelation 2, verse 10, do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. So by hearing, obeying, sacrifice, that will help develop the attitude we need to win our race. And then we have our nutrition. As a driver prepares to get into the car and run those 500-mile races, they've gone through a lot of this. They have put their car through multiple tests, as I've said, but they themselves have gone through preparation. They have probably changed their diets. They have worked out and gone through some rigorous weight training. Many of those drivers, they participate in other activities just to keep themselves in shape, because they're going to be strapped tightly into a vehicle that's going to be running for about 4 hours at temperatures much greater than what we can experience in our passenger cars. So they've got to be properly nourished and conditioned for that time. And we too, in our race, we need to be properly conditioned as well. In John 6, we read a couple of passages that help us understand this idea of spiritual nutrition. In John 6, verse 35, and Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. And this idea is repeated a few verses later in verse 48 when he says, I am the bread of life. That's where we get our nourishment, from Jesus. He is the source of that. He provides all that we need. And if we focus on what he did, what he said, what he taught, and the example, just study that entire example of what he has given us, that should be plenty nutrition for us to follow. And there's a couple other passages as well that speak to this concept of nourishment. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 2, we read about the milk, which we need to grow and thrive as newborns. As newborn babies, desire the pure milk of the word that you may grow. And if you consider a newborn baby, it's vital to feed it so that it grows and it thrives. And I'm no expert in baby nutrition, okay? But I do remember this. I do remember that my children loved to drink the milk. They would drink milk and it helped them grow. And our milk is right here. It's the Word of God. We need to read it, study it, get involved in it, dive into it so that we all can grow and thrive. And then finally in John chapter 4, this is the story of the woman at the well. And we read in verses 13 and 14, Jesus answered her and said to her, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, referring to the well water. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. As we go through our days, we need to be refreshed. We become thirsty, and we need to replace that. And water is a common drink that we use physically to consume our thirst. I drank out of a bottle just before we showed up at the building tonight, and I'm sure some of you may have too. But spiritually thinking, Jesus, he is our source of our nourishment. He is the source of our refreshment. And just like there's a lot of drinks out there that we can consume to help with our thirst, there's only one way that really is the best, and that's through Jesus. So let's be sure that we're using using the right sources to help nourish ourselves spiritually. Thirdly, our training. As I mentioned, many of the drivers today, they put themselves through very intense workouts. Because again, these races that they're going to be running are pretty hard on the body. They even take advantage of the latest technology. Many of them will get into a simulator and play a video game. They'll run the race on a video game to prepare their minds for what they're going to experience. They have practice sessions at the tracks. They'll get out there and practice, trying to figure out what's the fastest way to get around that track. Okay, if I drive in this lane, how fast do I go? If I go down a little bit, how fast do I go there? So they practice trying to learn as much as they can so that their car can be the best that day. So how do we train ourselves spiritually? Well, we start with some self-discipline. In Romans chapter 8, verse 13, we read, "For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live." We know and we encounter many things, as I've said, in our daily lives that could potentially hinder us from getting into heaven. A lot of people we encounter and a lot of the situations we find ourselves put into, they're not the people we need to be around. In some cases, they're not the places we should be. We need to recognize that, hey, we're not in a spot where we need to be. This is not the best place. And we need to have the discipline to walk away from those situations. You're at work. A lot of your peers get together and say, hey, let's go out and let's go such and such place and have some drinks. That's probably not the place we need to be. So we just politely excuse ourselves and go a different route, go a different way. But we also train ourselves to endure life. Endurance is something that we just train ourselves to act and behave in a consistent manner when situations come up. Again, going back to coaching, when I was coaching, one of the things I always tried to instill upon my team is it didn't matter whether we were winning by 10 runs or losing by 10 runs, we were going to play the same way every time. And some of it had to do with we didn't want our opponents to see any weaknesses in us, but I was just trying to instill upon them that discipline that we play the game the same way regardless of whether it's raining, snowing, windy, it doesn't matter. We're going to go out and do the same things that we've been trained to do. And that idea can also apply to us. When we're at home, or we're at the store, or we're out for dinner, the things we say, the things we do, the behaviors we have should be consistent. We all know that Satan is finding a way to get into our lives. He's looking for any little crack in our foundation, in our personality that he can get into and affect us. And we need to be aware of that, and we need to endure that and be sure that we're reminding ourselves of those situations. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 10 through 13 is up on the screen. "Therefore I endure all things for the sake of the elect, that they may also obtain the salvation which is in Christ Jesus with eternal glory. This is a faithful saying, for if we died with him, we shall also live with him. If we endure, we shall also reign with him. If we deny him, he will also deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful. He cannot deny himself." Right there. It's right there in front of us. Endure. And then lastly, train ourselves to be patient. Okay? Again, I talked earlier about sacrificing and suffering. And similar to that, we need to be patient in dealing with those situations. Luke chapter 21, verses 16 through 19, comforts us as well as regarding this idea of patience. Jesus says, "You will be betrayed even by parents and brothers, relatives and friends, and they will some of you to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake. But not a hair of your head shall be lost. By your patience possesses your souls." Times may be rough. Things may be said to us, done to us that hurt us. But we need to have that patience and endurance and be faithful, and that will carry us through. And lastly, it's our attire. Again, going back to the NASCAR example, before these drivers get into the cars, they are in fire suits. They wear helmets. They wear gloves. They wear boots to protect their bodies. When they strap into the car, they have very tight 5-point harnesses that hold them into the seat. They have attachments to their helmet so that they don't, jar their helmet around if they were to get into an accident. They are pretty much the only motion they really have is their hands and their arms so that they can steer the car. It's a pretty complex system. It's pretty restrictive. But the point is, if they were to get into an accident, those things would help save their lives. And the same could be said for us. As we're going through our race, we need to be wearing the right clothes. And the garments that we need to be wearing need to be cleaned. They need to be cleaned. You see, before we enter the race, the clothes that we're wearing, they're stained. We've sinned, and they are stained. And the only way to clean them is to be baptized. And when we're baptized, the life that we live, the person that we were, is cleansed. And we're ready for that race. And the one who cleaned us was Jesus Christ. He cleaned us with that blood that he shed on the cross. Revelation 7. Verses 13 and 14. Then one of the elders answered, saying to me, "Who are these arrayed in white robes, and where do they come from?" And I said to him, "Sir, you know." So he said to me, "These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation, washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." Baptism will wash our sins away. Baptism will clean ourselves so that we can run the race. So let's go back through these 4. So how do we prepare? We get the right attitude. We have the proper attitude. Be obedient. Take in the proper nutrition. Believe in Jesus. Believe in the Word. Study the Word. Train yourself. Be disciplined. Be patient. Be prepared to endure. And lastly, wear the proper attire. Be baptized and put on Christ. On Wednesday, I don't know which driver and car is going to win the pole. I don't, okay? I do know a little bit about the success of some of these drivers. I do know a little bit about their history and what they've done at Daytona. But that doesn't necessarily translate to success on Wednesday. And I've watched pole qualifying before, and honestly, one of the biggest factors that I have not talked about in terms of who wins that full position has nothing to do with all of this. It has to do with luck. You see, it might be a little puff of wind, a change in wind direction. Instead of having a tailwind, you now have a headwind. That will slow you down. It could be a small amount of cloud cover. If you've ever been to Daytona and seen the track, it is huge. It's a 2.5-mile trial oval. It is big. And if one of the areas is cooler than the other, that translates into a speed difference. It could be the difference between being in position 1 or in position 21. It's that significant. But I don't know about you, but in my race to heaven, I don't want to rely on luck. I don't. I want to be sure that my attitude's right. I want to be sure that I'm taking in the proper nutrition. I want to be sure that I'm training myself in the right way. And I want to be sure that I'm wearing the right attire. That's what's going to help us win the race. That's how we get to heaven.